and the fact that it started out as a party and headed down Oxford Street, and then the police raided, and I'll talk about all that when we get to Taylor Square. But what it did, it ended up here in the Cross. I mean, people came up Darlinghurst Road, came up William Street, like there, and the cops directed them into Darlinghurst Road here, and people were heading for the El Alamein fountain, where we've actually come from this morning. They got to the fountain, and the organisers then said to the police, "You're going to read the Summary Offences Act," which means they'd be off the street in 10 minutes. They had to do a couple of minutes to actually disperse, otherwise people would be arrested. And the cops said no, and people then started to move back towards Taylor Square. They decided, well, let's finish up the night where we started in Taylor Square. And then the cops pounced. There was a paddy wagons up that end of the street, just beyond the fountain in Macleay Street, and there were paddy wagons up there in Darlinghurst Road. And they started to move down and caught people in a pincer movement right here. And this is really where the cops attacked the first Mardi Gras parade. It was just a melee. In the end, 53 people ended up being arrested. The cops were really targeting lots of women. And in fact, through all the photos I've got of demonstrations that actually took place around that Mardi Gras period, you'll see the cops predominantly actually targeting lesbians and dragging them into paddy wagons. That's a woman called Robin Plaistow. Now Robin is important because she was one of the early members of camp, and she actually worked very closely with lesbian mothers in the 1970s, often women who were in relationships with a man and were leaving the relationship because they'd actually come to terms with their sexuality and the difficulty of the children and their custody and who would get that and what. And Robin was actually arrested at here in this strip, and her picture appeared on the front page of the paper on the Monday morning. And of course she got really in great difficulty because she was a teacher and sort of was brought up before the headmistress and given and there's another one of the cops. What was happening is people were being forced into paddy wagons, and other people coming out of the joints here who didn't like the cops anyway were actually assisting in getting people out of the paddy wagons and trying to actually protect them or get them away from, drag them away from the police. It was really quite interesting. It wasn't just gay people who were involved in this, gay men and women, lesbians. It was actually the locals here who actually tried to assist the revellers on the Mardi Gras. There's one thing that you'll notice about this particular photo, which is true of every photo of the police during that particular incident. They've got no identification tags. They've taken off their name tags and their numbers. And you couldn't actually say, I was assaulted by a particular police person, because that you couldn't identify the police person. They couldn't stand up in court. Sorry? Absolutely police brutality for you. So yes, people gathered here. In Taylor Square, there'd been marches in the morning, and they gathered for a street party. And there'd been a licence given for actually holding the street party. But Darlinghurst cops were opposed to it. One, on a legitimate ground, that this was a major thoroughfare on a Saturday night, and they wanted to hurry everybody up. So there was a practical reason there, although a licence had been given for the Mardi Gras. And the second was, they were really pissed off with people shouting, out of the bars, into the streets, out of the bars, into the streets. This was a threat to them. It was a threat to them, and it was a threat to their livelihood, or supplementary income. But it started off like that, as a party. People tried to dress up. Now, this picture's important because the person in chalky white face there is a guy called Ron Austin. And Ron was, in fact, it was his idea to hold a street party. He'd seen a film about activism in the United States and said, well, we're going to have this march as part of International Gay Solidarity Week, which is being held around the world. Why don't we have a party a fun party in the evening. And he said, and somebody, Marg McMahon, I think, or Marjorie Marg Lyons said, "Oh, you mean a Mardi Gras?" Yes, and that's how it actually was born. So people came along, people sort of attempted to dress up. Not very well.
What year was this?
1978, 24th of June 1978. And so therefore you can see, again, some drag, but not very good. But people were actually attempting. People are actually attempting to actually get some sort of dress up. The Pope, by the way, on the right, on the left there, the Pope costume has now gone into one of the museums. It's a fairly famous artefact from that particular evening. And so then they got halfway down the street, and that's when all hell broke loose, because the cops hurried them along, tried to stop them, forced the truck into Hyde Park, turned off the sound system, and the cry went up, "To the cross!" And that's how the Mardi Gras, as we know it, sort of ended up, because they went down Cottage Street, they went up William Street, and that's where, as we said, that's where the cops pounced. Now, the thing to note about all this is that the bar owners were totally opposed to the Mardi Gras. They were totally opposed, and a lot of bar queens were opposed to activists. There was a real divide. Don't be activists, you'll only stir up the cops, you'll only bring us trouble. Let's leave us alone. But of course that was no good, because the cops were harassing people anyway. I know after the failure of the law reform bills in 1981-82, that there was an increase in police harassment along Oxford Street, because myself and my co-convenor Barry Charles went along to Police Minister Anderson to complain, and we went along to complain again in 1983 when there was after the Club 80 raid, and it was Barry actually who suggested there needs for a police gay liaison group, which the Minister was agreeable to, but nothing was going to happen until after Mardi Gras, and indeed until after they'd closed Darlinghurst Police Station. So you've got this divide between activists and the bar queens and the bar owners and the cops. The second Mardi Gras in 1979, people came from all over Australia to actually take part. And we actually gathered bail money beforehand, because we thought there was going to be trouble again. But people came willingly, expecting that. The bar owners were opposed, the bar queens were opposed, and the Sydney Star, which is now known as the Sydney Star Observer, the Sydney Star, the owner of it, Michael Quinn, was opposed. But he came along. And he came along to actually just see what was going to go on as a reporter. And he enjoyed himself. And he went back and he actually started to spruik the importance of a fun event like the Mardi Gras. And he did it to the bar owners. That, by the way, is the second Mardi Gras, my photo of it. And you can see the sort of style. There's the truck with the loudspeaker, and people sort of dressing up, but people actually really enjoying themselves on the particular evening. So he went back and he started to spruik the importance of the Mardi Gras to the bar owners, and he started to actually develop this sort of concept of the gay community. Now, he was an old right-winger and very much into the pink dollar and the commercial aspect, and how that would actually benefit a lot of gay commercial owners if they sort of, chased after the pink dollar. So the idea of the sort of the gay community, however, comes out of what Michael actually was writing and pushing. And gradually that idea took hold of the gay, or then the gay and lesbian community. And finally, what happens is that on the third Mardi Gras, the bar owners themselves get involved and actually have a float competition. And so the first floats were actually in 1980. And this is actually the winning float, which is a takeoff of the what's the group? Village People. So it's a takeoff of the Village People. And it won. And it was the entry which was put in by our old the old bar that we talked about right in the beginning, the Barrel Inn. And that was the Barrel Inn's entry and into Mardi Gras. And that's really the beginning of the Mardi Gras as we know it. The following year, 1981, it went to summer, and again attracted more people. Still a bit political. In 1982, it had a slogan called "On Our Way to Freedom," and in fact, as co-convenor of Gay Rights Lobby, I was asked to actually launch the Mardi Gras that year, which I did. And if you're interested in what I actually said, it's up in Lost Gay Sydney or my own personal Facebook page, put up a couple of days ago. 82, Harry Britt from San Francisco Supervisors came out to actually launch the Mardi Gras. In 1984, the year the Reverend Troy Perry, who founded the Metropolitan Community Church, launched the Mardi Gras. But 1984 saw law reform, and that was actually sort of the end of the Mardi Gras being overtly political. Of course, it's always political, but being overtly political. And it's the sort of the festival that we actually have today. I've had it. I'm sorry. I think we're going to actually go any further. I think I've talked out. So thank you all for coming on this 33rd year of the Mardi Gras. The sisters and I